Hi friends, welcome back to Seams Fabricated. I am your host Lily, and this is the podcast to come to when you want some sustainability inspiration and some transparency from inside the fashion industry. So last week I covered the topic of color psychology, how certain insects can see up to 100 million colors, different color meanings through history, and how humans take 1/10 of a second to judge someone, partly based on the color they're wearing. So how do our clothes get their color? Fabric dyes, right? Well, in this episode, I'll be covering the different types of dyes and natural dyeing processes, as well as the effects on the environment and our health. In the world of textiles, every dye falls into one of two categories: natural dyes and synthetic dyes. Here is a very basic history breakdown. For thousands of years, humans have been coloring their textiles with natural dyes and getting some pretty amazing results. The first evidence of pigments used by humans are found in cave paintings. These paintings were often made from clays and mineral rocks. The oldest cave painting of two human hands and some wild piggies is made from a clay called ochre, which makes a nice orange color. The oldest evidence of textile dye was found in Peru, potentially dating back over 6,000 years. Garments were woven into patterns using different colored threads. Some were dyed white from milkweed, some earthy tones from ochre, and some vibrant blues. Of course, the coloration has faded now, but it's really impressive that the colors have lasted this long. What's more impressive is that the blue dye was made from quite a complex and lengthy process. Indigo is found in the stems and leaves of specific plants. They first need to be fermented for a time, and then aerated and sifted to a solid compound. This compound then needs an alkaline component, in this case, urine, pee-pee, wee, yellow snow, number 1. Whatever you want to call it. It's gross. But this concoction made it soluble in water and ready to dye. These people were not primitive. They were educated and intelligent, like you and me. And obviously, they loved color. The ancient Egyptians were known as experts of textiles in their time, and were able to produce colors such as red, purple, greens, blues, yellows, and indigo, among others. Their sources varied from sea algae to roots, fermented leaves and vegetables, minerals, and rocks. They were also the first to fix dyes onto a white base to create paintings and artworks, a technique that we still use today. The ancient Phoenicians made an amazing deep purple color known as Tyrian purple from the murex snail. If you're interested in how some snail mucus was one of the most valuable resources on the earth, then I have an episode for you called The History of Purple Clothing, Power, Death, and Riches, which dives into the whole world of purple dyes. The Phoenicians are thought to be the first foreign merchants to trade with India, as they were particularly fond of India's cotton, which they are still known for even today. Indian culture has always been full of color, from vibrant spices to colorful garments and paintings. Aside from the wide array of natural pigments, they were also able to produce dyeing techniques. Using a variety of methods, they were able to produce perfect repeating patterns, detailed hand-painted textiles, woven patterns, and trims. I could do a whole podcast episode on Indian fabric printing and dyeing alone, but I'll save that for another time. Many of the intricate textile designs had religious meanings and were important to the native people, which is why many still in India continue to carry on with these traditional arts. Northern Africa has made some gorgeous reds and burnt oranges from native plants for thousands of years, and similarly, Australian Aboriginals have used dyes from rocks, clay, and plants for as long as history can tell. In all cultures, pigments have also been turned into paint for artworks, caves, and body paint. It wasn't until 1856 that 18-year-old chemist William Perkins accidentally made the first synthetic dye, which was the very sought-after colour purple. He made the discovery in his lab while trying to make quinine, a malaria-fighting medicine. This marked the beginning of commercialized synthetic dyes, and he became a very rich man. There are many different types of synthetic dyes for many different purposes. The major classes of common dyes are acid, basic, direct, reactive, vat, dispersed, azoic, sulfur, and mordant. To make it even more confusing, different dyes work better on different textiles. Some of these dyes are even converted to food coloring and are safe for consumption. Others, not so much. So what exactly are synthetic dyes made from? Cracking crude oil, which is a process used to refine, you guessed it, the fashion industry's favorite fossil fuel, petroleum. And yes, that includes food dyes. I learnt this today. Artificial food dyes are made from petroleum.
Oh, gross!
Cracking is also used in the creation of gasoline and diesel fuel. This process is done by intense heat and pressure, which, from what I understand, separates the hydrocarbon molecules into lighter ones and leaves behind the heavier gases, such as methane and propane, to be used in other products. So how does a prehistoric oil get turned into so many pretty colours? Slight variations in the molecule structure makes it able to create basically any colour, and much more vibrant than natural colours ever could. In the world of mass production and businessmen, artificial dyes are much more beneficial for a number of reasons. They are cheaper and quicker to produce, easier to maintain consistency and quality control, and can be used on a wide variety of fabrics. They are also capable of creating more vibrant colours which are not found in nature. This is why, since their invention in 1856, they have become widely used and quickly replaced the natural dyes. With all the excitement over this new technology, no one seemed to check the negative effects of these artificial dyes. I'm sure Mr. Perkins never foresaw the damage that his invention would cause. After only using these dyes for 166 years, we have created immense damage to the planet and ourselves. It's not just the dyes itself that are bad, but the way we use, produce, and discard of them that are also problematic. I have touched on this subject in a number of previous episodes, but to be specific about fabric dyes themselves, let's have a look at just how much damage they cause. High toxicity. The production of these dyes leaves workers exposed to high levels of dangerous chemicals, such as aniline. This toxin damages hemoglobin in the bloodstream and impairs oxygen movement around the body. Dioxin. a carcinogen which causes cancer growth, and a possible hormone disruptor. Formaldehyde, another potential carcinogen that also can cause suffocation, severe burns, and rashes. You know that new clothes chemical smell? Yeah, that's usually formaldehyde, another reason to wash your clothes before you wear them. Chlorobenzenes affect the central nervous system, thyroid function, and are neurotoxic, meaning they affect brain functionality. Heavy metals like chrome, copper, and zinc have been well-known carcinogens for years. These are just some of the toxins used in the clothing that we wear every day. There is now evidence that what we wear does leach into our skin and is absorbed by our body and can lead to hormone disruptions, rashes, headaches, difficulty concentrating, nausea, and asthma. A study published by ESPR, the Environmental Science and Pollution Research, in 2018 conducted an experiment using a mimic of skin membrane and exposure to benzothiazole, a common harmful contaminant in clothing. After 24 hours of exposure, up to 37% was absorbed by the skin membrane, concluding that the chemicals in clothing are able to be absorbed by our skin and penetrate even further. Although it's unlikely that any one of us will die specifically from this type of poisoning, there are still substantial health risks with wearing these chemicals all day long. The people most at risk, though, are the ones in the chemical plants and textile making facilities. There are numerous deaths each year due to the inhalation of these toxins, and thousands more becoming sick. People living in areas with high pollution from these toxins are impacted by cancers, rashes, breathing difficulties, and a number of other conditions much more frequently than other communities. So who works at these facilities? Very low-paid workers who have no other choice. But the thing that makes me so mad is that the workers are often not trained in safety measures, and they are actually unaware that the chemicals they are working with will potentially make them sick. This has led to huge issues of lack of safety and even children working in these facilities. What about the impacts on the environment? In 2011, the Chinese Jian River turned red due to the illegal dumping of textile dye. Black rivers run throughout India.
The water is black and as thick as tar, and when the monsoon season comes, you can smell it.
When dye has polluted a river or stream, sunlight struggles to get through to the plants and animals living underwater. It also causes health and reproductive issues in many animals. It has led to a decrease in fish populations and contributed to animal extinctions. It takes synthetic dyes around 50 years to start to decompose. In that process, more harmful chemicals are released into our world, even if dealt with in the most responsible ways. Although some action has been taken to ban certain dyes, when money is involved, the wheels keep turning. Some have even resorted to illegal activity or have withheld vital information about the extent of damage done to humans and the planet. Thankfully, true organic dyes are returning to the scene, and culture and passion is returning to people who realize how wonderful, generous, and important the natural world really is. Indigenous textile dyeing is still being done here in Australia. After falling through a wormhole of YouTube videos, watching amazing techniques, plants, minerals, spices, rocks, and even rust be transformed into incredible, intricate, vivid patterns, I've realized that I have to try this native dyeing techniques with materials right from my own backyard. Eucalyptus, comfrey, marigolds, mint, parsley, beetroot, and my favorite, avocado. The perfect ombre avocado is a smooth green on my toast in the morning. But do you know what color the seeds produce? The most beautiful shade of dusty pink I have ever seen. Who knew that I had pink dye waiting to be used every time I have breakfast? If that's not incredible, I don't know what is. And now I have another use for my kitchen scraps other than composting. Do natural dyes have a future in the fashion industry? Over the years, there has been much debate about it, and a lot of natural dyeing techniques have been made redundant. But the answer now in 2022 is that we will eventually have no choice but to return to natural dye techniques. So why not return now? Perhaps the dye isn't always exactly the same. Perhaps it's slightly more time consuming. But perhaps that's exactly what we need, to slow down our lives and not be so caught up in the perfection of things and enjoy the nuances and uniqueness of life. In turn, we will be making a huge step in helping our planet recover from the destruction that we've already caused and securing a safer environment for the future, while also improving our health and not contributing to the suffering of many working in the fashion industry. That is more than enough reason to ditch the harmful chemicals and return to our roots. Literally. One more bit of trivia for you before I go. Synthetic dyes are often referred to as synthetic organic dyes, which you may think sounds like an oxymoron, and in my opinion, it is. It is named this because the petroleum is a product of the earth and nature, so it itself is organic. But we process it so much that it becomes man-made. With this line of thinking, there is not a product in the world, not even a tiny speck of dust, that isn't organic. And I think that's a huge mistake to be throwing it around willy-nilly like that. We aren't calling plastic organic, nor should we. And I think synthetic dyes should be just that, synthetic. So don't be fooled by clever labeling and technicalities. So, for your next arts and crafts project, why don't you attempt to dye your own fabric using kitchen scraps and leaves and pretty flowers? This would be such a fun project for a quiet weekend, something to do with the kids or even with your friends. I'm looking forward to trying it out myself, and if you give it a go, I would love to see your results on Instagram. Tag me at Seams Fabricated. I would love to see your sustainable projects that you're working on. I will, of course, be sharing my dyeing attempts too, so be sure to follow. On that note, if you have enjoyed this week's episode, send it to a friend and help spread the sustainable lifestyle over a highly toxic one. I appreciate every single listener. Please be sure to rate this podcast. Give me some of those shiny stars. And I will be back next week with an episode that I have not decided upon yet. So it will be a surprise for me too. This podcast is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts.
The water is black and as thick as tar. And when the monsoon... Monsoon?